Here to set you free. How you doing? I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome or welcome back. Only true democracy and talk. We really appreciate you being with us. We also really appreciate our first guest in this hour, and that is Fred Redmond. Now, Mr. Redmond is Secretary Treasurer of the 60 unions and 12.5 million with an members of the AFL-CIO. In 2022, he was unanimously elected to the position as the highest ranking African American officer in the history of America's labor movement. Now, his path to the Federation's second highest office began back in 1973. He went to work at Reynolds Metals Company in Chicago. He became a member of the United Steelworkers, the USW, and he was active in his local union almost immediately, serving as shop steward, eventually vice president. He served 3 terms as local president, and in 2021, Secretary Treasurer Redmond was elected president of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas, a very prestigious and international post. The website for the AFL-CIO has a plethora of information. Check it out, aflcio.org. Their handle on Blue Sky is at aflcio.org. That's actually their website. Their handle on Facebook, Instagram, and X is at AFL-CIO. And if you want, Secretary Treasurer's handle as well on X at ST Redmond. That's ST Redmond, Secretary Treasurer Redmond. And Secretary Treasurer Redmond, more than a pleasure to have you with us. That is the correct Blue Sky handle at afl.cio.org on Blue Sky. Secretary Treasurer Redmond, thank you for being with us. I really like you taking the time for the program, especially on this Friday. I know you have a lot on your plate, and also some of us on Fridays, try and sneak out a little bit early, but that's almost impossible with the amount of stuff that you guys have going on. And I just have to say, if I didn't know all that you do, and I'm impressed, I would be impressed not knowing the AFL-CIO. I constantly see how much work you and President Schuler are doing. There's so much post. There's so much fighting for the middle class. There's so much interaction with all of us out there. And we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. The AFL, we're going to talk about the standing in solidarity with the unions, challenging this administration and their attack on labor, and you're standing in solidarity in a court of law. Secretary Treasurer, welcome back. Good to have you with us. You know, thank you for being with us. President Schuler, AFL-CIO president, issued the
Mhm.
following statement on new litigation filed by affiliated unions that are part of the AFL-CIO. And these unions are challenging the Trump administration's executive order. And this executive order aimed to strip collective bargaining rights from not a few folks, but from hundreds of thousands of federal workers. First of all, Secretary Treasurer Redmond, did you think this would happen? And I know you guys are nonpartisan, but at the same time, you guys do make announcements of support and sponsorship, except I don't want to say sponsorship, but endorsement
Mhm.
of candidates. And when when Donald Trump won the presidency, and started to bring in some of these names that have really concerned many people out there,
Yeah.
even Republicans and people that voted for him. Did you have an idea this was coming down the pike, or is this worse than what you anticipated?
Well, Leslie, I have been part of the labor movement for decades, and I must admit that I have never seen any presidential administration in my life attack working people as much as the Trump administration is doing. But I've also never seen our movement as united as we are right now. Between Trump's executive order attacking collective bargaining rights, his mass firing and layoffs of federal workers, and these workers provide essential services to the American people, and his gutting of crucial agencies like the Department of Education, he's setting working people back by decades. And I never thought that I would see such a frontal attack on people who wake this country up every morning and tuck this country in at night in what we're seeing right now. And, Elon Musk's outsized influence, his tremendous influence in this administration, it's a deafening alarm to working people about the direction that we're headed under Trump. And, make no mistake about it, Doge isn't about efficiency. It's a power grab by Musk and Project 2025 architects to restructure the government to do the bidding of billionaires. And, look, no one voted for mass firings and cuts to services that we rely on. What voters want was lower prices, a union on the job. They want a more responsive government, affordable health care, and quality public education. And they want Social Security and Medicare that they can depend on when they get into retirement age. So, no, I've never thought that I would see this sort of attack, Leslie, and, it's been deafening. But the labor movement is more united than ever in fighting back.
Yeah, that's one of the silver linings with the bad news with this executive order, and an all-out assault on working people, and many of those working people voted for this president. There were
That's right.
there were certainly voters within the union across the board
Yeah.
that voted for President Trump because they thought they could he could bring prices down. But there's something called Project 2025, and some people would say that blueprint was a foreshadowing of what was to come. Would you agree that this executive order is the very definition of union busting?
Oh, absolutely. You know, when you think about it, we're in the fight of our lives, and this administration and Elon Musk, they're undermining workers and their union contracts at every turn. I mean, think about it. With the stroke of a pen, Donald Trump issued the most significant presidential attack on organized labor in our lifetimes, maybe ever in the history of this country. So we view this as a frontal assault from the President of the United States on not just government employees, but on the entirety of the labor movement. And Trump is escalating his attack on free speech, America's most fundamental rights, retaliating against workers because unions are standing up to his illegal actions in court and on the street. So this is an attack on the workers who, think about this, the workers who make sure our food is safe to eat, care for our veterans, protect us from public health emergencies. But this is what everyone who's watching this needs to understand, that these folks are not going to stop here. This is an attack on every union
Absolutely.
worker and every union contract throughout this country.
And then they came for me, and he even talks about the union workers, in that famous quote. We have we should have a fundamental right to unionize in the United States of America. We do have, and we should continue to have, a fundamental right to collectively bargain, and the union should have that right to do so for workers in all different fields, including the federal government. This executive order affects more than 30 agencies in the federal government, correct? And I understand, look, Americans, Democrat or Republican, are okay with pork being cut,
Hmm.
programs that are ridiculous. No, nobody wants our tax dollars wasted. But the amount of federal agencies that are being slashed and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that are being slashed, there is no way all of that is pork, and there is no way all of those people aren't part of being an essential working necessity in our federal government. Can you speak to those more than 30 agencies that are being attacked?
Well, I mean, when you look at it, these layoffs and these firings are causing Americans to lose access to essential government services that they rely on. And, the federal agencies that's being attacked is agencies that do the work of the American people every day. I mean, and
Absolutely.
these attacks have made it harder for millions of seniors to access Social Security, strip veteran benefits from our vets by decimating VA offices around the country. And what it has done is doomed millions of Americans to suffer from diseases that scientists that he fired were working to cure. and it's only going to
Absolutely.
get worse.
Secretary Treasurer Redmond, hang on. I'm so interested in what you're
Sure.
saying. I didn't notice the clock. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we are back. I am Leslie Marshall, and he is Secretary Treasurer Fred Redmond of the AFL-CIO. Secretary Treasurer Redmond, thank you for holding. Welcome back. We are talking about the executive order and this administration's continuous attack on labor, on collective bargaining, on the right to unionize. And I also want to point out, you had said that you've really never seen that, you haven't in your lifetime seen such solidarity as we're seeing. And we also haven't seen the support of unions like we're seeing, right, in recent years. There are 70% of Americans. So you have nearly 9 in 10 young people who support unions right now. And the AFL-CIO and its nearly 15 million workers are standing with America's unions, and they're taking on this administration. They're taking them to court, because you can't just stand by and watch all these people be stripped not just of their jobs, but of their rights, and jobs that really affect us, as you were saying, Secretary Treasurer Redmond, before the break. Please continue, and then want to talk about, a little more specific with Congress and what can be done about it and what's been introduced to do something about it.
Well, thanks, Leslie. I mean, the workers that's being affected by these executive orders are workers who 85% of federal employees work in the communities that we live in. These are people we go to church with. These are people that our kids go to school with. These are their parents. And, a lot of Americans think when you talk about government employees, you're talking about bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. But in the federal workforce, only 15% of federal workers is housed in Washington, D.C. So, this is an attack on our neighbors. This is an attack that's going to affect the quality of our communities and people that live in our communities. And, you were saying that 70% of Americans stand with unions. And and polls are showing that by a 2-to-1 margin, voters oppose making it easier to fire federal workers. And the fact is, no one voted to attack the freedom to organize with our coworkers for a better life. No one voted for this. And, these executive orders and the one he issued last week against government employees, we feel very strongly that this is the first domino to fall. I mean, if Trump can do this to federal workers with the stroke of a pen, he can do it to every worker in America. Make no mistake about it. And it's crystal clear that this administration has unions on the enemies list, meaning that no worker is safe under this administration. So, Trump and
Secretary Treasurer Redmond, you are 100% right. We are already seeing companies that
that's
are
right,
getting rid of DEI policies, as an example, that are in the private sector because that's
right,
what the president wants. And they
that's right.
want either contracts or they want federal funding. We've seen it with universities, but we've seen it with other jobs in the private sector outside of the realm of education. So you not only are absolutely right, we're watching it sadly happen in real time.
That's right. And, sad to say, I was having a conversation earlier, Leslie, and today happened to be the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. And
Yes.
when we look back on the struggle that so many before us have stood up for, the right to, public accommodations, the right to vote, the right of freedom of association. When we look at the things that so many people gave their lives for, then what we're doing is we're seeing us regressing back into that time when certain people in this country did not have rights and women did not have the rights to vote. And we're slipping back into a time when America was not perfect in any means. And America has never been perfect, but America has always been a place that promoted democracy and promoted freedom. And those people who was left out had the opportunity to protest and to work their way into the American system. And, being the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King, then, I was talking to some folks this morning reflecting on how far we have came as a nation in terms of respecting all Americans and, ensuring their basic freedom, rights, and liberties. And this president is definitely rolling us back.
No, absolutely. And as a woman, and you as an African American,
Yeah.
it's insulting to make the assumption that if somebody is a certain gender or has a certain skin color, that we were hired because the bar was lowered. And that is extremely offensive, discriminatory, and prejudicial, and should not, especially in 2025, have any place in the conversation of the United States of America. I don't care what political party you are. Let's talk about politics. Let's talk about Congress. There is a bipartisan, it's amazing anything could be bipartisan right now, how divided everything and everyone is. But there is a bipartisan piece of legislation. It's called the
Yeah.
Protect America's Workforce Act. This would, in effect, overturn this executive order from the Trump administration. Can you speak to us, Secretary Treasurer Redmond, about the Protect America's Workforce Act?
Well, Protect America's Workforce Act, like you said, it is a bipartisan piece of legislation because Republicans are starting to hear from their constituents, from the people in their congressional districts. And, they're saying loud and clear, this is not what we voted for. We did not vote to attack unions. We did not vote to take people's jobs. We did not vote to reduce government services in our communities. So, because of that outpouring that literally caused Republican Congress members to stop holding town halls in their communities,
Mhm.
fearful of facing their constituents because of the hostility that their constituents have for these policies, have forced some Republicans to come to their senses and to, put forward this piece of legislation, bipartisan,
Yeah,
bipartisan.
and you
You
talk
know,
about votes. There's votes, and then there's prodding, and you can prod by picking up your phone and calling Congress, and you can do it right now. You can do it when we finish this broadcast. Jot down this number, put it into your phone, jot it down on a pad if you're at your desk. Call 844-896-5059. We are asking, Secretary Treasurer Redmond and I are asking every single American who cares about the fundamental freedom of all workers to join a union if they choose, to unionize if you choose. Call your member of Congress right now. Call them at 844-896-5059 and just tell them, I want workers to have the freedom to join a union if they choose. Make that call and make that call today, 844-896-5059. We have less than a minute before the end of the first half of this hour with you, Secretary Treasurer Redmond. What would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with today?
well, look, first of all, Leslie, thank you. Thank you for your advocacy and thank you for your voice and thank you for continuing to stand alongside working Americans. Look, we have a long way to go to get union density back up. And the CEOs, they aren't going to make it easy on us in order to do that. But it's undeniable that something is happening across this country. And it's up to us to keep the momentum, even in a changed political landscape. Look, we're going to play defense in the face of these threats, but we're not going to take our foot off the gas on offense either. It may be tougher to organize in the next 4 years, but toughness defines working people, especially now. We've got the most
Amen, and very
unified
well
labor
said.
movement.
Secretary Treasurer Redmond, thank you for being with us.
Thank
Check
you,
out the
Leslie.
website for the AFL-CIO. I'm Leslie Marshall.